Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting firm Riderflex. If you enjoyed today's guest interview, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe to the Riderflex podcast. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand. Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Alex Reed on the Riderflex podcast. Good morning, Alex. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing great. I'm happy to be here and excited about our chat.
You know, I've been following you on social media. I'm a fan. We've been connected for a while, right? You know, from the big ass fans to the Trumans, and I don't even know how we got connected. Maybe it was through John, but yes, I've been following your stuff, and you're great on social media. So I'm a huge Alex fan. I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate that, Steve. Yeah, it's funny. Like I have more and more of those these days where it's like how we've been connected for years. I don't remember how we connected or who our mutuals were, but you have these, especially now in the kind of COVID era, all these digital friendships, and it's harder to trace back, I think, when it wasn't a physical meetup to how you all met. And so I find myself having this conversation more and more where it's like, I don't remember how we met, but we know each other.
And isn't that interesting? Interesting, we're virtual friends, right? Like when I see your postings, my mind says, oh yeah, I know Alex, like I know you, like we're friends, but
Exactly.
but then when you really think about it, like, well, wait a minute, we've never actually met.
No, it's a weird thing. And I have people too that I'm sure you do as well, where it's like, this is a pretty good friend. Like we've talked quite a bit. Like I feel like we've known each other for a long time and know each other really well. And then you realize, but we've never actually shook hands. And I think that's going to be more and more common though, going forward, which is a great thing too. It opens the door to meet more people that you otherwise probably wouldn't get to know.
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into business, I want to know a little bit more about you personally, some early life stuff, if you don't mind. Let's talk family, mom, dad, where you were raised, any siblings. Can you give us a little overview if you don't mind?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no crazy story. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. 2-parent home, brother and a sister. I mean, is probably classic American dream type thing, solidly middle class family, which was fantastic. And it took, I think, perspective of getting older and understanding that not everybody is born into that same circumstance, that bubble, to really, really appreciate just what a leg up it was for me as a child to have a support network, parents who cared and were involved in the sports that I played and cared if I came home with A's, B's, or C's, siblings to push me and be competitive. Of course, every upbringing is not without challenge, but there was no trauma. There was no concern that I was going to, go home to an abusive home or food insecurity or things like that. So, one of the things I talk about now that I'm older and have a family of my own is just how important those formative years are. Not that you can't come out of more difficult circumstances, but it's important. And I'm beyond grateful that I had that. And now, it's also this pay it forward thing and be understanding, be empathetic, because not everybody grows up with those same advantages. So my upbringing, like I said, not outrageous in any capacity, but I think was really critical to giving me a work ethic, giving me, humility, gratitude, things that really matter now, I think, more than ever.
Isn't it fascinating how you're right? So many people live in this little bubble and they have no idea some of the struggles that other people go through or what life could be like, 10 miles away from them. And they're on social media, they're on Facebook, and they're mad about whatever, right? Some little problem or what they think is a problem. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, there's a kid who has had beans 3 nights in a row. His mom is a drug addict, hadn't seen her in 2 days, and he's just trying to figure out what to eat, and he's 12 years old, right? Like, people really need to venture out a little bit more, I think, than they have been. And I think it's a great practice. I remember the last time Kim and I went down to Cancun. I mean, that's just a small example, right? I mean, you fly down to Cancun, and when they're driving you from the airport to the quote resort, all you got to do is look left and right when you're on the bus, and you're like, oh shit, okay, yeah, there's people that are in pretty bad shape. So yeah, it's good to be grateful, good to be humble. I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, I mean, perspective is a hell of a drug. I think, it's one of those things where, not to go too far off topic, but diversity, and I mean that in the broadest sense, is important, because diversity of thought
Yes.
can cover up blind spots that you have as an individual. I know that I wasn't exposed to certain things, but you want to be around people who have different perspectives, different upbringings, different philosophies, because then you're able to challenge each other and make sure that you're not falling into that trap, like you said, of thinking these problems that I'm dealing with today are the most important in the world.
Right.
Because
Right.
what ultimately all that does is create blind spots for you, and it's a weakness. So I do think it is always important to maintain that perspective that the way you grew up or the life that you live even now in present day is so different. And gosh, not to again go even further off topic, but you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, and there are people that are leaving their homes with probably the thought in their head, I'll never go back. I mean, that's a situation that's unfathomable to most of
Right.
us.
Right.
And yet here it is happening, something that we never really pictured going on there. And so it is really important, I think, to always maintain that balance, and because you can get caught up in the minutia and stuff that doesn't
Yes.
matter. And it's good to kind of bring yourself back to balance.
I want to say one more thing on this topic, but then we'll move on. I want to ask you about your mom and dad. One more thing. This happened just yesterday. Scott, my co-founder Scott here at Recruiting from Riderflex, we were complaining earlier that morning because we got this freaking client that hasn't paid us on time, and we're, and I'm in a bad mood yesterday morning, and I'm like, this fucking guy better pay us, and I'm just mad, I'm upstairs getting coffee, and my wife's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I just, people always trying not to pay us. Anyways, in a bad mood. Well, the point is, a few hours later, I'm talking to somebody that is an acquaintance of ours, and I had no idea that he has brain cancer, and
Oh,
and
man.
it's terminal, and I had no idea. I've known this guy for a while, always in a good mood, always positive perspective. I mean, you would never know that he's been going to chemo, and he's been in the hospital 3 times in the last 2 months. And I'm listening to him, and I'm like, wow, like, okay, I just need to check myself. I need to, like, here this guy is, and I'm thinking I'm having a bad day because the client hasn't sent the check on time. And this guy's like up and positive and just pushing forward. I'm like, wow, okay, they just snapped me back into reality.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always somebody carrying some burden. And Steve, where I thought you were going with that too, was that the person who owed you money had brain cancer.
Oh no, well,
But where I was going with that was, I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt and assume
yeah,
good intent, because we're all dealing with things
good
and
point.
we're
Yes.
not open about them. And so that's one thing that I use too, is I don't know what that person's going through right now. So I want to make sure that I'm at least assuming the best of intent, and going into it that mindset, because it's tough going through life if you assume everybody's out to get you. And that's a rough way to go.
It is true. Everybody's going through something. Let me ask you, your parents, what'd your mom and dad do? Real quick, if you don't mind.
So my parents neither graduated from college.
Okay.
They both came from big families. My mom was one of seven. My dad was one of five. And my dad also grew up in a very white collar single parent home, lost his dad at an early age,
Mm.
and was in college and then ended up going into the army. And I think what came from their upbringings that was really passed down to me was just a focus on hard work, integrity. I mean, they were Northern Ohio families, just very down to earth. You show up, you do your work, you do a good job, and you don't ask for anything kind of upbringings. And it's funny. I can point to things now. My wife likes to joke that I just won't let food go to waste. Like I'll eat until I'm sick if it's the difference between throwing away food. But you start to trace those things back and where that
Yes.
came from. And it's like, yeah, because in a household like that, where it was paycheck to paycheck, month to month, resources were scarce. You had to be, very conservative. And I think that's when I think about my parents, they were, and again, they weren't shaming me into that sort of thing, but you pass these values down, and they were just very value driven people, very loving. Family was more important than things. Experiences were more important. Even though we were middle class, we weren't wealthy by any means, but we always did family vacation because that was important to them, was to have those experiences. And those are things that now are important to me and my family, and making sure that we're making memories together. And so the parent question is interesting to me because I'm always thinking about, well, where did that quirk come from?
Yeah, right.
Why am I this way?
Yes.
And why am I asking my kids to do this thing? And it
Yes.
is funny when you start tracing back, you see how much of that is passed down genetically.
Are they still around, and where are they at?
They are, and part of the reason. So I was out of Louisville for 15 years, which is where I am now, but where I grew up as well.
Okay.
Part of the reason I moved back is because I wanted to be closer to my parents, for my kids to have a good relationship with them. My
Right.
dad has Parkinson's now, unfortunately, so
Mm.
he's been good. I mean, he's 10 years in, and he's managed it well, all things considered. But I know there are certain things that they need help with from time to time, and will continue to need help with. And so being near them was an important decision and factor for my family as well. And again, that just speaks to the bond of family being important. My brother and sister-in-law now live 1.5 miles away from me. My sister's just a few minute drive. Like, those are things that just really make me happy.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
great.
great situation as far as family and proximity and all that goes.
Very good. And so were you the first kid to go to college, or did your brother and sister go as well?
My brother's 2 years older, so he beat me. So he was
Okay. Did he go to
first one.
UK? Did he go to
He did.
Kentucky?
He
Okay.
started at Xavier University in
Okay.
Cincinnati and ended up transferring to UK. And it was out of state private tuitions are no joke, even back then, 15 years ago. So I ended up going to UK, and he and I, we were always pretty close, being just a couple of years apart, being boys who played sports. And so that carried through to college and beyond. And
Did you play? So you were a high school athlete. Did you get to play intramurals at UK?
No, I didn't play
Yeah.
anything
Okay.
competitively at UK.
Okay.
But yeah,
Did you go to the
not that
basketball?
good.
Did you go to the basketball games?
Well, I was actually a Louisville fan. I did go to some games, but growing up in Louisville, I ended up, being a Cardinals fan. My
I
parents
see.
didn't have any university allegiance, so they kind of picked up the Cardinals when they moved here from Northeast
Okay.
Ohio.
Okay.
So yeah, I never picked up the Cats, and probably my mistake.
Wow. So you weren't one of those crazy students in the stands that I see going just nuts.
No, I was
Okay.
never a big school spirit guy.
Okay. Well, all right. So talk to me. Well, by the way, were you a wild kid in college? Were you partying every night, straight A's? Where were you in that?
Little of both.
Okay.
So, yeah. No, I graduated with high honors, but I was also, I got into a little bit of trouble here and there. And looking back at it, I was like, the thing I did well was I got in trouble with the smart kids.
Ooh, good. All right. Ooh,
So you limit the amount of situations you put yourself in that are potentially fatal. So that way you can get into some trouble, make some mistakes, learn from it, but you're not going to spend the rest of your life in prison, hopefully, because of some stupid thing you did at 19 years old when you've been pushed out onto your own and your brain's not even fully developed.
Right. Were you ever arrested? Any DUIs in there? Anything fun?
Nothing that I want on record, Steve. We'll say that. And nothing too bad. No, nothing too bad.
Okay. All
But
right.
it's funny. It is funny. We put, again, I'll go on tangents if you let me. So sorry, but we put 18, 19-year-old kids in the strangest situations in this country, ask them either to go fight for us, to go figure out what they want to do for the rest of their lives, to take on tremendous amounts of debt, to go into these situations that can lead to really bad outcomes. Like I said, whether it's you getting arrested or, having some sort of accident. And it's like, we know scientifically your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until you start hitting your kind of early mid-20s. Yet we put you in these situations where you're forced to make really big life-altering decisions. And I'm a big advocate for, we should be pushing that back a little bit. We shouldn't be expecting our 18-year-old kids to go out there and make adult decisions quite yet. But that, like I said, that there's a rant from me, and I get made fun of and teased around the office all the time because I have rants about just about anything that I'm surprisingly passionate about.
I always tell people, well, man, when I was 19 years old, I had two things on my mind: A, getting laid; B, drinking beer. That's it.
We'll just say it. We're idiots. We're 18-year-old, 19-year-old men are complete idiots, and we're driven by all sort of bad incentives. And it's just like, why? We know this. Can we break the cycle, please? So maybe one day.
So you're moving along now. If I'm looking at the timeline right, Big Ass Fans started while you were still in school or something. Walk me through. Did you always, I guess the first question is, did you have an entrepreneurial bug early on? Did you know you wanted to be, in a startup kind of early phase entrepreneur? Walk me through how all that happened as you're going through school.
No, I mean, to my point, Steve, about 18-year-old and 19-year-olds, I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do when I was in college. I picked like a major that was more marketing and comms oriented because I like to write. I was always a writer. So I was in the School of Journalism and Telecommunications. It was on a track to join an ad agency. I did that as an internship between my sophomore and junior year. Very quickly realized that it was not that interesting to me. And so the next summer is when I joined Big Ass Fans. So it was between my junior and senior year. So I was still in college. Loved it. So you could say it was on the client side. I was working in the marketing department for a manufacturer. It was a relatively small company at the time, maybe 75 people, about 20 million revenue. So established, but by no means a giant.
What'd they have you doing at first? Just, were you sales? Were you marketing? What were you doing?
I was marketing, and this was great fortune. It started off with building case studies. So calling customers, interviewing them, writing case studies. At the time, we were branching into different markets. So instead of just the one industrial fan, we were getting into commercial applications, gyms, schools, restaurants. And we wanted to build a library of content around the different use cases. So at the same time that I'm learning about customers, I'm learning about our product, I'm refining my writing skills for marketing. I'm getting to interact with different salespeople who are connecting me to their customers and building rapport throughout the business. So with the benefit of hindsight, I'm like, I couldn't have asked for a better assignment coming in as an intern. And that graduated into a full-time role. And I was really, even during my senior year, working about 40 hours a week there because I had a light course load my senior year. But I started doing vertical market marketing to these industries. So instead of just building case studies, having complete responsibility for certain segments of our business from a marketing plan perspective. So, advertising, trade shows, content, PR, pitching to the industry, trade publications, and getting kind of a 360 view of all of marketing. And really, at 20 years old, being given tens of thousands of dollars to run campaigns, and that freedom to fail. I didn't know it at the time, but that was what was sort of giving me that entrepreneurial nudge, because it was entrepreneurial. Our CEO loved young professionals because we were fearless. We didn't know any better. We hadn't made enough mistakes to be afraid of doing it, which is why the average age in the company was like 30 years old. And so I got all of this responsibility, and I can point to milestones throughout my 10-year run there where it was like, wait, you're asking me to do this? It kept going. But I was one of those people, back to the hard work comment, that I liked it. I liked being challenged. I enjoy a healthy amount of stress and putting that pressure on myself. And so I was just always one of those people that said, yes, give me that to do. Let me try that. And I think that's a really healthy mindset to go into, because if you're just waiting on somebody to give you more responsibility or give you more challenges, you may be overlooked. And so being out there and asking for it, and a willingness to make mistakes and to learn from them too, that humility, I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And so having the founder of Big Ass Fans in particular take me under his wings and sometimes in a hardened way tell me what I was doing wrong, was I couldn't have asked for a better role right out of college. I mean, it was.
Were you reporting right to the founder, and who was that?
No, so I was probably just reporting to like a marketing manager or something in the beginning. But
yeah, when you were global marketing director, though, who
the CEO.
Okay.
And so like 4 years in, I was running marketing. Actually, so I did an interim stint, and then I went and did I launched our consumer brand and ran that for a few years.
I see. Okay.
And then on the heels of that is when I full-time global marketing director for the company, and there was reporting to,
Okay, you're reporting to the CEO. There was no CMO.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was the head of marketing when I left the business. It had been for a few years.
And who was the CEO?
Kerry Smith. He was the founder.
He was the founder. Okay, where did Bostock come in on that, John? I can't remember.
So John came in, I think in 2016, as the COO, first ever COO of the company.
I see. Okay.
And so John, his main responsibility was really was helping Kerry, the founder and CEO, set up the organization for sale. So Kerry had bootstrapped. I mean, there's not many founders that will bootstrap from zero to $250 million in revenue, because the skill sets are so different, right, at every stage of the business. And I think what Kerry realized was his passion is on the earlier stage. Operating a mature company like that, for some people, that's a ton of fun. For Kerry, I don't think it was as much fun at that point. And so he got to know John. John was like, I think I can really help you position this company for sale so that you can do what you want to do.
I see.
And I told John, I don't know if he ever shared this story with you. I mean, it was probably within 6 months of him joining that I'm out. Just wanted you to know, and I'll help you transition. I don't know when I'm out, but this isn't for me.
Why? Because you didn't want to grow it, or because at first you didn't like John? What happened?
No. Same reason as Kerry. I realized that what I was passionate about was earlier stage businesses.
Okay.
We were getting it. And some of that was, we're getting into, cost controls, and we're getting into stricter organizational design and succession planning and, building a bench. And I liked the less formed side of actually figuring out what our go-to-market was going to be, and then how do we expand. And so I was open with him, and that's when he brought me into the fact that he was there to help sell the company. I should stick with it. I can help him in that process, which is what I ended up doing. So that last year that I was there, pre-sale 2017, I would say 60% of my time was operating as a leader of marketing, and 40% was the deal process. Because it was
great experience for you. Great experience. I mean, that was a pivotal point in your career right there. You probably didn't know it when it first started, but
I never know it, Steve. I only benefit from hindsight. I never know when I'm in the middle of it.
Great experience going through that. Did you grab some equity? Did they say, hey, here's some equity, or you didn't have any ownership in the company?
I did before I even knew the sale was happening. So we had what was called a stock appreciation right plan. it was very discretionary. The founder, would give shares to people. I don't know. It wasn't very clear at the time, but what was amazing was he gave shares to, well, people like me that were young that he didn't have to. I didn't negotiate it as part of my compensation package when I joined. I was an intern when I joined. So he gave me grants along the way. But there were production employees in the stock appreciation right plan, very junior level. So it wasn't one of these things where it was only if you were an executive did you have access to that and did you benefit at the end of the sale. A lot of people benefited, a lot of life-changing outcomes, which is really cool. And
life-changing for you, or enough to buy a house somewhere in the middle.
I mean, it was material. And good. So I would say life-changing, because I think it would be unfair to not say that, because it was, like I said, it was material. It wasn't great. I bought an island. So I mean, that's the tough thing, right? Is when you talk about it, everybody, life-changing for some people is different for others.
True.
So, and what again, I think was, we at Vsimple now, I'm skipping steps, but every employee will have equity no matter where they come into the organization, because philosophically, I think, one, it changes the mindset when you're an owner versus just a participant. But two, we want that. That is so cool. And I remember Kerry remarking on it more than his big exit, and his money was like, how many lives did I just change? That's pretty cool.
It is. It's a special thing that I've talked to many guests on the podcast about that. As I get older, I'm 54 now, and as I get older, it's really all about the lives you changed. I mean, the material things are fun, I guess, but really, at the end of the day, it's how are you as a human being? What lives did you get to affect? How did you mentor and coach people? What opportunities did you give people? And if you own a business, if you're an entrepreneur and you're creating a business that produces a job that somebody buys a home with or puts their kids through college with, I mean, that is a special thing. It really is. And it's hard to describe how wonderful that feels until you actually go through it. So I totally get what he says.
Well, our philosophical alignment is really strong, Steve, because I agree with you. I mean, you don't take anything with you at the end of the day. It's relationships, it's the human connection. And it definitely takes, I think, getting older, at least it has for me, to continue to gain that perspective that it's not about the outcome, it's about the journey. So I love hearing that from you too, because I think that's just, we'd all be better off if we operated with that philosophy.
Isn't it true? So let me ask you, so were you married at the time? When did you get married?
I was a few days shy of 24 when I got married. So I got married pretty young.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So as you're moving up and developing and all that through Big Ass Fans, you were married in there and you're starting a family. How many do you have kids?
Yeah, I have two. And my son was born almost 9 months to the date after we got married. So there wasn't a long honeymoon before the family started. I joked that I went in like a 14-month span, or maybe it was 18 months, 14 or 18 months. I went from a guy with a girlfriend to married with a house and a kid. I don't know that anybody's life has transformed that. I went 0 to 60.
Did you meet her in school?
Zero regrets. I met her at Big Ass Fans.
Oh,
so
really?
I was still in school. She wasn't. She was a little older than me. She was already out in the workforce. And she was in sales at Big Ass Fans.
She was in sales and you were in marketing. And then what you saw her, you're in the conference room and you're like, I don't know. I think I need to, hey, you want to go to lunch? Let's go to lunch.
It's funny you say that, because it was sort of like that, except we had group lunches. So just a group of us ended up having lunch every day because we all enjoy each other's company. And so we got to know each other as friends over a pretty long period of time before we even started dating. But it was it's always tough in workplace. And I probably now, if I were single, would never even think about that, because I know what the downsides are. But again, being young, you don't. Yes. But it's a great place to get to know somebody that's, not a bar and not a high pressure situation and stuff like that. And so there was the benefit of really getting to know somebody on personal non-dating level versus, oh, I saw you and I asked you out, and now we're putting on this facade of, who we are. And it was good to be friends first.
What was the first move? Hey, come over. I'm gonna make you dinner. Hey, hey, I got tickets to a ball game. Like, what was the first little? You remember?
I don't have a move, Steve. I don't. I actually don't. I don't remember what our first official date was. That's terrible. She might.
She's gonna. You're in trouble now.
Yeah, I probably am. No, I don't remember. Probably because I have no game.
And did you have to tell your boss? Were you like, okay, we need to tell the leadership team, or they knew, or they didn't care?
Culturally, there were so many couples there. Okay. I mean, we always said they're the big ass babies, we're everywhere. Some of our best friends met there, and they have kids, our kids' age, that are friends. There's like multi-generational, big ass fans offspring. So I think as we got bigger, it became a little bit more of a concern. And in fact, my wife voluntarily left the business after our second, under any kind of pressure, but I was working a ton. In fact, I actually almost left the company earlier than that because we were having our first, and I wanted to have some resilience. And I was like, oh, we both work for the same company. What if shit hits the fan? Right. No pun intended.
Yes.
And that was the first time that I came into the stock plan, was when I tried to leave. It was like, oh, no, we want you here. Here's what we have going on. Here's some things you can do that'll make it interesting. And I felt better about the future, at that point. But then still, it was too much to have us both working, because the next 6 years from there or whatever, it was very long days, lots of travel. And we were fortunate to be in a position that my wife could stay home with our 2 kiddos.
Very good. How old are your kids now?
My son just turned 10 and my daughter is 7.5.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Congratulations on a wonderful family.
Thank you.
So the exit happens, and then what? You and John develop a relationship, or he's like, hey man, I'm gonna go start something else. Walk me through how you got the Trumans with John.
Yeah, we did start talking during the sale process about doing something more entrepreneurial. John knew where my heart was from that initial conversation, and John was before he became GE John and Mr. Corporate was a failed entrepreneur right out of school, which is totally like a great experience. But I always kid because it's amazing. John really invented podcasts before they were a thing, and before technology made it feasible. And I always kid him that he was like 5 years off from being a multi-billionaire. But timing is so important, and especially in tech. But John always had that itch. I think he had ancestors, his grandparents were very entrepreneurial. So I think he saw this as an opportunity. He took a leap from GE, very safe, high paying. Nobody would ever fault you for being a career person there. He took a leap to join Big Ass Fans. There was no guarantee he was going to successfully consummate that transaction. And he worked it masterfully. He was ready for another leap. He wanted to start something at zero. And that, we looked at a number of different options, and we landed on a direct to consumer cleaning products company. Because, I think we're just opportunistic, and, I'm skipping ahead. I'm in B2B SaaS now, and it's not because I'm passionate about cleaning or I'm passionate about software. I can get passionate about anything if I believe that what we're doing adds a lot of value, if there's a huge market opportunity, if I like the team. Those are the variables, because people will be like, went from fans to cleaners. And I'm like, the category doesn't matter. It's the opportunity that I get excited about.
Gotcha. Well, I don't know how you get excited about cleaning products, but how did he talk you into it?
And the lack of innovation in the space, both from a product and technology standpoint to a brand standpoint, brand voice, all the way to the go-to-market. It's as boring as it gets. It's brands that have been around for a century that sit on a shelf, that have looked the same and functioned the same for years and years. There's a lot of waste because it's, the way they're packaged and sold is specific to retail, where they're sold, on big pallets, but that doesn't really work if you want to buy it direct in the e-commerce era and have it shipped to your home. Because I I can't ship a full bottle of cleaner and only charge you $3 and make any money on it. So there were a lot of things that we felt like were just outdated about the cleaning category. And now looking at it, and there's been a ton of change since 2018 when we jumped into it, which is a good thing. People are rethinking their supply chains, they're rethinking their packaging, they're rethinking the customer experience. And I like to think we played a role in moving the industry in a better direction. There's still a long way to go, but that was a big part of the draw, was just like, nobody's touched this. And I think the reason is there was never a motivation. When everything sat on a retail shelf, it was about having the brightest colors, the newest fragrances, maybe some interesting bottle designs, but nothing that was really technologically innovative.
Right.
And nothing that was conversational, because you can't be. The brand is sitting on a shelf. Their customer is the retailer, not the end user. And so that was one thing that we were like excited about bringing to the table, is we can actually get feedback directly from our end users, and customer service and that engagement with our users was a huge part of what we did, and why we had really good retention rates with our brand, because there is that demand. We didn't know if it was there. We were like, okay, maybe nobody ever has any questions or ideas for their cleaning brand, and it is what it is. But the minute I can think back to when John and I were at Starbucks and tinkering, and we turned on live chat on our website, and the bell starts ringing. It's like, okay, people, they do care. They have questions. They want to know about, so what do I use on this surface? Or what are the ingredients in this? Is it safe if I have plants? I mean, you wouldn't believe it, Steve, how many questions. And the days of legacy brands just sitting there and having no two-way communication with their customers is just over.
Yeah. That's great. I can almost see the look on your face. You're sitting at Starbucks and you're like, is it safe on plants? I don't know. How do we answer the question?
Yeah, fortunately, we had a great relationship with our manufacturer and the developers of the product, because we had formulas that were unique to us.
Great. Awesome.
And so anytime we got too technical, because people would go deep too. And
I bet
you got to get the chemists and the scientists in there to help, because we weren't chemical engineers. You learn a lot. Wasn't a mechanical or electrical engineer either, but I was able to move fans. And I'm not a software engineer, and here I sit today in a software company. But you need to know enough, and you need to be able to find those common threads. If it's a one-off, sure, maybe that's no big deal. But if you're hearing this question over and over again, one, you're either not communicating it properly in your sales and marketing, or two, there's an opportunity there. Because what they're doing is they're signaling to you that this is important. You got to listen to what they're not saying when they're asking the question, because there may be opportunities from a product development or a go-to-market standpoint that you just hadn't considered. And that's been the thread that's really consistent through my career, is going direct, talking to your customers, hearing what they're saying, and then incorporating that. It's such a virtuous cycle. Big Ass Fans had a customer advocacy team who their only responsibility was calling customers to say, what did we do wrong? It could be anything. I didn't like the color of the packaging it came in, or the installer threw a cigarette butt in our parking lot on his way in. Like, whatever it was, we wanted to hear about it, because it's a lot of times customers won't give you their feedback. You really have to pry. They just want to check the box and say, oh, it was okay. It was fine. It was fine. But no, really, what could we have done better? And that mentality was, it was a huge benefit to the companies.
For the listeners that don't know, Trumans.com, Alex was the co-founder and chief marketing officer. You guys started that in 2018. Did you bootstrap it with John, or did you have funding right away?
No, we had a little bit of cash come in from the manufacturer as well, but other than that, there was no outside investors.
Okay,
so we ended up doing a venture round. Yeah, that's right. But that was about a year or year and a half in before we did the outside round.
More great experience for you. Now you're co-founding a company and learning how to raise cash, and more great experience. Yeah. Who'd you get? Can you tell us who you exited to? And did you exit in March of 2021, or when did you guys exit there, and who bought it?
Yeah, I can't. I mean, you could probably figure it out. I can't share who, because it was a deal based around intellectual property. Okay. And they wanted to kind of be stealth. In fact, it's piloting this year in Europe. So it's a multinational organization that wanted to incorporate the technology we had developed into their own brands. And so that's why you can still see Trumans.com exists and hasn't been redirected, because that wasn't part of the deal, wasn't part of the transaction.
I see.
Which makes sense. We were only a few years in, so your brand equity, even though people who knew the brand loved it, on a macro scale, like global scale, it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
And so a company with existing brands that it wants to support is way more focused on, okay, how do I now improve this huge base that I have from a margin perspective, from a supply chain efficiency, from a customer experience. And it was a deal centered around the technology.
For a CPG brand to exit that fast, that's I don't see that very often.
No, and it wasn't our plan. I think it's circumstantial. You roll with opportunities. What we observed, in fact, when we started that conversation with the company who we ultimately exited to, it was around licensing, and it was years prior. And so there wasn't a calculated.
Okay.
John and I started looking at, I don't know how closely you pay attention to DTC, direct to consumer trends. There was a golden era where Facebook advertising was super cheap, and a lot of brands popped up where all it was a brand, right? They were going to the same manufacturer. So you had 15 beauty brands that are selling virtually the same thing with cool packaging. We wanted to differentiate and have some potentially unique go-to-market models. One of the things we looked at was a 7-figure deal in Asia that we ultimately walked away from because of the exit, but was to take our brand and our product with a partner into Korea and Japan, which was pretty interesting. We had a few others. One was doing some innovation work with Henkel, which had been a lead investor. Seeing if we could put the technology into different categories outside of just cleaning. And then the third one was this sort of licensing model that we were exploring. And that was ultimately what led to, them just acquiring it versus licensing it. So it's one of those things where I always say, especially in early stage companies, you've got to be open-minded to the situation that you find yourself in. Because you can have a big vision, but so much of that changes from the time you write your initial thesis of why we're doing this to the actual close or exit. And that was very much what happened for us. It was something we didn't think we were going to run for the rest of our lives, but yeah, I think 3 years was probably quicker than we thought too.
And no ride along. You didn't have to stay for a certain amount of time, anything like that. You left pretty quick afterwards. What was the deal for you and John there?
Yeah, well, because it was an intellectual property-based sale, and there was no operating the existing brand or the existing infrastructure. So John and I actually, months prior to that, had engaged in a wind down process.
Okay.
Knowing that they weren't going to take our existing operations. So team members knew what was happening long in advance, and nobody was surprised. So there was no we have to maintain this on the other side. In fact, the acquirer didn't want to have to maintain anything. They wanted to be able to plug and play the IP.
Great. Okay, very good. Congratulations. Successful exit that fast.
Well, appreciate that, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, that's really congrats. I mean, you learned a lot, more great experience there. You and John bonded at Big Ass Fans, and then you started that together. From that, were you thinking, okay, I've exited twice now, right? Once I guess as an employee / equity holder, and then once as a co-founder. Do you think, all right, I want to take a year or two off. I'm going to chill for a while. I'm going to spend time with my kids. I want to start something else. Where does your mind go from there?
Oh man, it was interesting. I knew I wasn't going to do something fast. That was the one thing I had sort of resolved was I wanted to take my time and really evaluate a number of options. I remember I built a spreadsheet with different variables that I weighted based on how important they were to me. I mean, things like location, size of company, role. I knew I wasn't going to start another company. That was one thing I had ruled out.
Why?
I just wanted a break. the 0 to 1 is so grueling. And so whatever, I knew I wanted to join a business that was not pre-revenue, and not pre-product. I just didn't know how early stage, but I had ruled out I'm going to do another company. And I'm not saying that I'll never do that again. I just didn't want to do that again back to back.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking about 6 months off, spent a lot of time with my kids, did a few
Cool.
consulting projects. But the month I closed is when I met the founders or the CEO at Vsimple, which is the company I ultimately joined.
Mm-hmm.
I joined them as an advisor in March. I said, sure, I'm not doing anything. They were pre-launch, so the product wasn't out in the wild. They were struggling a little bit with how do we position this? How do we talk to our customers about this? Value.
Were they funded? Were they funded or
angel?
Okay.
So they were pre-seed, but they had a little bit of angel investment. Great team too, and they were like, "Can you help us out?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm not
for free. Let me guess, it for free. It was for free.
I joined as an advisor. I got some advisory shares, but it was I
Okay.
was not looking for any compensation.
Okay.
And over the next 6 months, as I was figuring out what I wanted to do next, there was a lot of traction. So they were bringing on new customers, really big ones. The product was really taking form. The team was taking shape. And it got to the point where they were like, we need more of your time. So I said, okay, this was September, October. I was like, I can be with you all, let's call it 20 hours a week. Because I was probably doing 3 to 5 just advisory stuff, maybe not even that much. At the end of that 2 months of spending about 20 hours a week, the CEO was like, it's shit or get off the pot time. Like, I need somebody in here leading our sales and marketing organization. If you can't do it, I understand. Help me find somebody that can. And so I remember thinking about it over the weekend. I was relatively far along with a couple other opportunities that I had been considering. And I just told him, I was like, I'm in. Like, you are the type of people I want to spend time with. I believe in the mission. I love the traction that you've done so far. I want to be part of this. And the rest is history. And that was October of last year.
Did they have the money to pay you at that time, or it was a small salary?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm all of us in early stage business, I think you're not there to maximize your salary.
Right.
So they, are of course, they want to do as much as they can, but you also, if you're an equity holder in the business, which, as I said, everybody is when they come in, you also want to make sure you're playing the long game. Right. And so cash, we want to deploy as much cash as we can to growing the business, which ultimately grows our valuation, which ends up being the big payoff. So it's that trade-off. I mean, this is good. I don't know how to say this without sounding conceited. I had a pretty sizable offer from a PE-backed company in a really big role, and I would have hated it. And it was biased on the on the salary side versus the equity, because they want to make sure, if it's a private equity held business, they want to make sure they get their cut of the proceeds. And if there's any left over, you'll get it. But they're also not afraid to go out and, pay executives a really high salary. And that just wasn't where my heart or my head was at the time, and still isn't. It's about the money. I think it's going to get taxing very quickly if you're not passionate about what it is they're doing.
Great advice. Great advice.
Which
right
is
there.
Easy to say, although I'll say from a privileged position of, not having to worry about my electric bill being paid. I can hear in my own head, people be like, well, yeah, it's easy to say it's not about the money if you make enough to be comfortable. So I definitely think it's advice for people that are in that position, not to keep chasing it, but there's nothing wrong, I'll say, with maximizing how much you earn, and people should definitely fight for what they're worth.
Nothing wrong with that, but the great advice that you gave there is, if you've only worked for Coca-Cola or Nike or whatever, IBM, and you want to join a startup / small company, early stage company, you just can't expect to come in with your $275,000 a year salary that you were making and do that in a small stage company. It is somewhat of a sacrifice to grab the equity and play the long game. And you got to be willing to do that and be able to make those financial sacrifices on the personal side at home do things a little bit differently, to take the smaller salary, to invest in that opportunity. It is somewhat of a risk, but people just need to understand that. As Riderflex grows, we've been very blessed as a recruiting firm the last couple of years. It's growing like crazy, and we do an okay job with our social media. Not as good as Alex and John used to do with Truman's, but we're out there a lot, and people will be like, "Oh man, I want to join Riderflex. I want to be part of Riderflex. You guys are cool." I'm like, "Okay, let's talk about it." And then they're like, "Well, I need to make 225 a year," and I'm like, "Okay, well, you don't understand startup. You don't understand small
Yeah.
company. Like you."
Yeah, it's like have your cake and eat it too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all a spectrum, and I've as I've recruited for Vsimple, that's a common conversation that I have, is it's this sliding scale of
Yes.
if you want to maximize your earnings versus your earning potential, that's okay, but you need
That's
to
okay.
understand what your own risk profile is, and then
That's right.
pursue the opportunities that match that, because it isn't everybody's life circumstance is different.
That's right.
And one of the things I tell people at the startup too, is if you're in the venture-backed world, is you almost have to think about it as a 1-year contract, because if you're going from round to round, you may not make it to the next round, and you need to be okay with that uncertainty. And some people are, and some people aren't. But we shouldn't glorify startups for everybody, because they're not for everybody. Because there's a lot of variables to it. I mean, how much you're working, travel, compensation, certainty.
You touched on it earlier, because you said, and you reminded the listeners, like, listen, man, startup is a grind. It is very difficult. And I can understand why you said after exiting Truman's, you're like, okay, I don't know if I want to start something from scratch again, because for the listeners who haven't done that, it is the most difficult thing you'll ever do. I always joke around. I tell people, I'm like, look, here's the deal, man. Being an employee is easy.
Yeah, you don't worry about any of that other stuff. And you don't know it until you've done it. I mean, I think it is one of those things. You're sweeping the floors. You're the IT manager. And I went from that, having a 30-person marketing department back to I'm registering our domains and writing copy and visiting the printer and stuff like that I hadn't done for years. Which is what I wanted. And I still like that. I like the hands-on approach, but some people are not. And you just have to know yourself and be honest with yourself about what you want to do.
Let me give you a chance here before we run out of time. And by the way, for the listeners, Alex Reed on LinkedIn. I encourage you to go there, check him out on LinkedIn. I think he's still, are you still accepting followers? I think so. Probably. It depends. But he's also got a cool personal page, alexreed.me, which I'm super impressed with. I'm looking at this thinking, holy shit, I need one of these. I need to do this. So you check him out there as well. It's really good stuff. And then vsimple.com, who he currently works for. I want Alex and he's the chief commercial officer there. Alex, give us and by the way, go to the website, vsimple.com. There's some videos in there and lots of great information, but give us the elevator pitch on Vsimple, if you don't mind. Go for it.
Yeah, so we are a centralized workspace for manufacturers and distributors that is partnered with a really unique go-to-market model and process to help these companies. We're targeting your mid-market industrial businesses. So I don't know, call it anywhere from 50 to 1,000 employees for the most part. We can go up easier, but it's a lot of businesses that have underinvested in how they work every day. So what we see is a lot of people that are over reliant on Office Suite, Excel, email, shared drives to get work done day in and day out. What we do is we dive into their operational processes. We'll simplify them, we'll standardize them, and then we'll centralize them in our workspace to reflect those processes, only more streamlined. I'm not doing 20 things in 20 different places. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows who's on first, who's got the next action item, where the documents associated with that project or process live. It's all in one place and it's customized to that business. And then we train it on the other side. We know that software, especially in lower tech industries, doesn't always stick. because people are comfortable doing things the way they have done it. And I don't think that's just true of lower tech. I think that's just human nature. We get comfortable. And so we go through and we handle implementation where we're on site, we're sitting with people, we're showing them how to use it. It's very simple. And a lot of that is just putting them at ease that we're going to continue to run alongside you for as long as you're a customer. So changes you want to see in the platform, that's all on us. And so I tell people what drew me into Vsimple was less the product, although I think the product is phenomenal, and more of that go to market, because it's really missing from this space. There's a concept in software called PLG, product led growth. You've seen it with Monday, Asana, Basecamp, Slack, where it's free, right? The freemium.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hope that you mix up to an enterprise account where you're paying for some of these features.
Right.
Doesn't work in this space. They're not seeking it out. They're not self-training. They're not customizing it because they don't have time or necessarily the expertise. And that's the gap that we're trying to fill here, is let us be that company that really understands the way you work and then delivers a product that reflects that or improves it. And then we'll stick with you, train you, and help you as you continue to grow and evolve.
Okay. And it's a SaaS product. Is it month to month based on user? What's the fee model?
That's right. Yeah. It's month to month based on user. Okay. If it's 10 users or less, it starts at like $100 a month and works its way down. So it gets more economical the more team members you have on it. And it's a land and expand thing. We don't try to bite off the entire organization at once. So we might start with 20 users, and then our first customer, for instance, last spring, when it was just getting up and running, started with a dozen, and they're over 200 today.
I see. Okay. Do you have to sign a long-term contract, or can you try it for a month? Okay.
No, that's another thing so the software model is so broken in so many ways that people sign you these 1-year deals where you have to pay to get out of it if you don't like it. And it's like, we're going to penalize you for delivering a shitty product that didn't work for your organization. So we don't do that. And then if you want to change anything, here's the card of a $200 an hour consultant that'll come in and do it. It's like, no, we'll do that for you. We'll do.
Is that part of the $100 a month, or it's extra?
Part of it? Oh. No, it's and all that work that I mentioned up front, like of us going through their process.
No setup fee. No.
We'll do an implementation, but it's like $2,500 to $5,000. And that's really just covering T&A for us to go out on site. So we've got a customer we're onboarding right now, and we're literally bringing them monitors. Wow. Because they were like concerned that, but this is another screen that I've got to look at. And I've got 2 monitors right now that I need up all the time. We're like, okay, we got you. We're bringing it. We're going to hook it up for you.
Wow. Okay.
It's a white glove sort of service. We didn't want to be, this one, I don't think it's what the customer needs, but 2, we don't want to be this race to the bottom. How cheap can we make it? How one size fits all can we build our product? There's a place for that, but there's plenty of options there already. So what we wanted to do is really partner with organizations that, I know that it's cliched, a lot of businesses say it, but I think if you saw the amount of pre-work we do in terms of doing process mapping based on, we'll interview stakeholders and we'll map their processes. And then we'll come back and we'll do a tailored demo, which reflects their processes, their language. All of that's pre-contract.
Wow.
So we're actually showing you how many steps we can take out, systems we can remove, time we can save, data we can report. We're spending all this time up front with no guarantee from them, because we want to make sure that they see value in it and it sticks.
Wow. Okay. That's impressive. Okay. Very good. All right. Vsimple.com. Anybody that's listening should just go to the website and go to the contact us page, or what do you prefer?
Website's totally fine. Our big contact us button is up there. So, or you can touch base with me. I'm engaging with customers every day. Right before this, we were doing a tailored demo for an equipment distributor. And those are a lot of fun because they're going through in real time saying, well, actually we call it this, and we're changing it there on the fly.
How about that? How about
their process? Tons of fun.
Very good, my friend. Well, if anybody can make this explode into the market, you can for sure. Your social media, and I know we're out of time here. We're 3 minutes over. I apologize. Your ability, Alex, to engage the customer and get them to care about the brand and talk about the brand and feel part of the brand and feel like they have a voice with the brand, your ability to do that is really exceptional. I never, like when I first saw Truman's, I'm like, okay, cleaning product is super boring. Like I really don't give a shit. And then, and then I started watching your social media and the things you guys are putting out. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Oh, let me see what's Alex saying to John today. What are they doing? They're having a
You're too
conversation.
kind.
And then all of a sudden you're following the brand. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this brand's cool. Okay, I'm gonna follow this brand. You do a great job of that, buddy. Really,
Oh,
really
thank
awesome
you.
job. Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
you're
Awesome
kind for
job.
saying that. We just try to be human, and have a little fun.
Love it.
Life's too short to be working on a boring brand.
Isn't that the truth, my friend? Life is too short not to have fun. If you're listening to this episode, and you ain't having fun, quit tomorrow, do something different.
Please.
Seriously.
Please. Yeah. Don't waste your time in a job you hate or working for a
Oh,
brand you don't believe in. Like, no. If you're
no,
excited about what you're doing, you won't work a day in your life.
that's right. I wanted to ask you a bunch more questions, but we're out of time. Alex, thanks for being on the Riderflex podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and sorry for my long-windedness.
Now, you did great, my friend. Thank you, sir.